What is up, everybody out there in podcast land? Welcome to the latest, greatest episode of The Fortress of Rock. I am your host, the Maestro Kevin Crane here, episode 141, April the 26th, 2024. Very excited. Concert season is approaching as the weather gets better, the outdoor venues open up. We will have a couple concert reviews for you, not one, but two, coming up in just a few weeks here on the Fortress. More details, of course, coming at the tail end in Wrap It Up. But you know what we always start with? We start with news of the world, our tribute to the late, great Freddie Mercury and Queen. So let's get into it. And of course, we have to start off with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Now, did they finally maybe possibly get it right for the first time in a while? Sure, it's very, very easy to get it right when you just say, you're in the Hall of Fame, you're in the Hall of Fame, you're in the Hall of Fame, you're in the Hall of Fame. Everybody gets in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. 16, yes, 16 inductees in this year's class for the Rock Hall of Fame. So, of course, that makes almost everybody happy. Ozzy Osbourne in, Peter Frampton in, Dave Matthews Band in, Kool and the Gang in, Foreigner in, Cher in, A Tribe Called Quest in, Mary J. Blige in. And those are just the inductees on the formal ballot. Other acts, other performers getting in. Dionne Warwick, okay. Got to explain that one to me. But Norman Whitfield, Alexis Corner, John Mayall, I kind of get that. MC5, kind of get that. Suzanne DePass and Big Mama Thornton. Yes, 16 inductees this year. Oh, wait, that's only 15. Maestro, you're forgetting somebody. Yeah, because I got to make a special point of this one on a couple different levels. I am not upset with the fact that this performer got in. I love him. Should have probably been in before now, given the wide open parameters that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame now abides by. But again, I have two issues with this. Number one, this is the same award, the Musical Excellence Award, that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame copped out with Judas Priest on. Well, we really can't get you enough votes to get you formally inducted and voted in, so we'll figure out a backdoor way to get you in. So we'll give you that light little pat on the back and say, oh, good job, Judas Priest. Good job, you're in, but we really couldn't vote you in. You get the special Music Excellence Award that puts you in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So that was insulting enough. But now we get a double backhanded slap, in my humble opinion, to the late, great Jimmy Buffett. Jimmy Buffett, number one, he gets this insulting award, the latest recipient. Can't find the votes, can't find the support for you among the voters and the board members, but we'll put you in the back door with the Music Excellence Award, just like Judas Priest. But on top of that, that being the number one insult, the number two insult is, of course, something we see in sports all the time. Let's recognize Jimmy Buffett after he dies. Terrible, terrible look in a year where the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame might have otherwise saved some face with true rock and roll fans. As previously noted, we get Foreigner in finally because Jan Wenner and his grudge are gone. Then we get Peter Frampton in and Ozzy Osbourne in as a solo act, and the Dave Matthews Band in. So this was a good year for true blue rock and roll fans. Of course, there is a lot more work to be done, but they still couldn't help themselves by insulting the legacy of Jimmy Buffett. Next year, I better see Styx or REO Speedwagon or Boston. We got to see Iron Maiden, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains. If this is truly a move back to what I would say is the middle, we're never going to go back to strictly rock and roll. We all know that in this day and age, in this world we live in. But this is a nice move back to the middle for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I'm sure Mariah Carey will get in next year, so all you Mariah Carey fans, don't be disappointed. She'll get in. I don't agree with it. I think it's garbage, but given how this whole system works now, I don't see how she's kept out more than another year or two. Or they could give her a special award like they did Dionne Warwick, who comes out and says, I don't really consider myself or have ever considered myself rock and roll. I have no problem with Dionne Warwick. I love my mellow music from the 70s, but she gets it. She's probably sitting there going, this doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me either, Dionne. But at least you get it, and you handle the whole deal with grace and class. Now, the one big brewing controversy here with having 16 inductees to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is with a time limit they're going to impose on every act. Word has come down that Foreigner is already having issues with deciding on one song. And that's a travesty in and of itself. Not just for Foreigner, but for all of these artists and all of these acts. They're not one-hit wonders. That's the whole reason they're going into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Yet you're going to ask them because you decided to give everybody the honor of being inducted. Now you're going to tell them, well, you can only play one song, so you need to pick one really good song from your career. Because that's all you get. In the past, other artists get to play 3 songs. Much easier to summarize a career in 3 songs than obviously one song. So, Ozzy Osbourne, you figure Crazy Train, most likely. Dave Matthews Band will be interesting. I don't know where they go. And they can't play a 15-minute improvisational jam, so that'll be fun for them to figure out what they're going to do. You figure Kool and the Gang does Celebration. Peter Frampton's got a couple options to choose from. But Foreigner, by far the toughest decision to make. Because they should have been in years and years ago with their catalog of unbelievable hit albums, hit songs. They should have been in a long time ago. And you're asking Foreigner to whittle their career down to one song. So, Lou Gramm is going to take part in this. Great to see as many members of the original lineup as they can possibly get together. I respect the current lineup for keeping the legacy alive. But as Ozzy Osbourne said here recently, it's a cover band. I don't know if I would throw that out there because that's very insulting for Kelly Hansen and Jeff Pilson and the other members, but I get it. But Lou Gramm has come out and said that Mick Jones has already decided on the one song that Foreigner's going to play, and it's going to be God Help Us All. I Want to Know What Love Is. And thankfully, Lou Gramm, holding on to some sanity, wants that song changed, or at least wants to figure out a way to pigeonhole, to shoehorn in a second song, and he wants Jukebox Hero. He feels that song is a much better definition of Foreigner's career than the sappy, crappy I Want to Know What Love Is. And I agree 100% with Lou Gramm. You have half a dozen songs that are better suited for Foreigner. If you had to pick one, you got Hot Blooded, Double Vision, Feels Like the First Time, Cold as Ice, all better representations of Foreigner's career than I Want to Know What Love Is. So I'm hoping in some way, shape, or form, whether they expand Foreigner's set to 2 songs or whether Lou Gramm Insanity win out and they change it up to make it Jukebox Hero instead of I Want to Know What Love Is. But it's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Of course, there is always going to be controversy. Now, we've talked here over the past year at least, if not longer, about the growing need for change, possibly government intervention when it comes to Ticketmaster, Live Nation, and the ticket system as a whole. Whether it's the fees, whether it's the fact that the true fans can't get decent seats at a decent price. Good news here this week, over 250 recording artists, including the likes of Dave Matthews, Green Day, signed a letter to the Senate Committee on Commerce as they are trying to push through a bill called the Fans First Act, which will reform the ticketing system, trying to put even harsher penalties on bots. Of course, bots are the modern day scalpers. Note, I did not mention one Bruce Springsteen. And I will stick by my guns with him. I've mentioned in the past, I think he's a phony. I think he loves gouging his fans for as much money as he can. I don't think he is the quote-unquote common man that he is portrayed to be. I think that's all a marketing scam. But good for Green Day, good for Dave Matthews. Billie Eilish, I believe, is signed this letter as well, so good for her and all the artists who are pushing the Senate Committee on Commerce to get the Fans First Act enacted into law. More legal stuff. Now, this one's an interesting argument to have. Madonna once again being sued. I think we discussed a few months ago in New York how there was a class action lawsuit pending against Madonna for being egregiously late to a few shows in New York. Fans sued. Now it is happening again in D.C., Washington, D.C. Show in December in Washington, D.C. Once again, Madonna shows up on stage 2 hours late. And again, the fans are fed up with it. The fans are trying as best they can to fight back. Now, this upsets me. It does. But I think reforming the ticketing system is more important. You're going to have egomaniacs like Madonna who are going to do this. And it stinks. It sucks. But remember, Guns N' Roses was notorious for doing this back in the early 90s. Now, some people say there's a big difference between why Madonna and Guns N' Roses show up late on stage for their performances. Guns N' Roses probably because they were indulging in adult beverages and other things a little too much. Madonna might be just pure arrogance and ego. And maybe that's the difference, and maybe that's why I'm rooting more for the fans in this case. But what do you give the fans back? You give them their ticket money back? I definitely understand the fans' point of view, especially if it's a weeknight show. People have to get to work the next morning. And if you're going to start the concert at 10:30 at night in a big city, we alluded to this with the New York lawsuit, you've got to worry about mass transit being shut down or being limited, not getting obviously enough sleep. You've got kids with you, I would imagine, at a lot of these concerts. So I would like to see the fans win in this case just to spite Madonna and her arrogance. We did have one passing in the world of rock and roll this week. The final surviving founding member, now that's the key point of this, final surviving founding member of the Moody Blues, keyboard player Mike Pinder, has unfortunately passed away. Now, what we would call the quote-unquote classic lineup of the Moody Blues, Justin Hayward, still alive and kicking. I believe Graham Edge is still alive. I could be wrong on that. But I know there are at least two members of the quote-unquote classic late 70s and 80s lineup of the Moody Blues who are still around. But Mike Pinder, the final surviving founding member of the Moody Blues, has passed away. So thoughts and prayers to his family, friends, loved ones, and the Moody Blues family in general. Not much in the way of tour news this week. Everybody's pretty much got everything set at this point in time in late April throughout most of 2024. But a couple interesting tours were announced here this past week. Returning after a 5-year break, the Experience Hendrix Tour will resume 24 U.S. states in September and October of 2024. Of course, the Experience Hendrix Tour is all about guitarists playing, of course, and paying tribute to the late, great Jimi Hendrix, featuring this particular go-around this year, Kenny Wayne Shepherd, Zakk Wylde, Taj Mahal, and Dweezil Zappa, among others. I have a little bit of problem with Kenny Wayne Shepherd as he talked about this announcement and talked about this tour. Of course, Kenny Wayne Shepherd has opened in the past for Van Halen. Kenny Wayne Shepherd talking about how Jimi Hendrix is the greatest guitar player of all time. I will take exception to that. I will never diminish or disparage the legacy of Jimi Hendrix, but no, there's going to be some people out there like me who are going to say, dial it down, Kenny Wayne. One of the greatest guitarists of all time, not the de facto greatest guitarist of all time. Eddie Van Halen. Okay, so the other interesting tour we've got to discuss, 21 North American dates in July of 2024. Asia? Is it really Asia? I don't know if you can really call this Asia. Now, don't get me wrong, I loved Asia. One of the greatest supergroups of all time, formed in the 80s. Jeff Downes, keyboard player, the only member of the original Asia lineup who's going to participate here in this quote-unquote Asia tour. Of course, John Wetton, lead singer, passed away quite a while back. Carl Palmer, drummer, he's out on the road putting together a semi-virtual Emerson, Lake and Palmer show. And of course, Steve Howe on tour with Yes. So Jeff Downes is the only member of Asia who's actually partaking in this tour. So sorry to say, I don't know if that really qualifies as something that's going to get me excited. And really, when John Wetton died, and I saw Asia open for Journey years ago, and John Wetton actually died just a few months before the show, and they got a guy to fill in. Now, the other three members of Asia were there. Steve Howe, Carl Palmer, along with Jeff Downes, were there, but it just didn't feel the same. So when John Wetton died, that was pretty much it, in my opinion, for Asia. Do you guys remember when MTV was cool, when it was awesome, when it played music videos? It was America's radio station. And even if you want to look at VH1 for a brief time, and now it's all about pregnant teenagers and people with IQs under 20 partying on beaches. Very little to do with music. Well, maybe, possibly, we're getting a little bit of the old magic back, but it's not going to be actually on MTV or actually on VH1. But remember Behind the Music documentary series talking about the greatest performers of the 80s, the 90s, and beyond. Behind the Music is returning in a limited run on May the 1st on Paramount Plus. So you've got to have Paramount Plus in order to watch. I believe there's only going to be 4 new episodes, if what I read is correct. And only one of them really, really applies here on the Fortress of Rock, and that would be because one of the 4 episodes will focus on Wolfgang Van Halen. I cannot wait. I am actually keeping Paramount Plus. I was going to cancel it because otherwise, to me, it's kind of garbage. I like Peacock much more, Amazon Prime much more. But I am keeping Paramount Plus for another month just for this, along with the Bob Marley One Love movie. And we'll talk more about that later on. So in that respect, very cool to see Behind the Music coming back. Of course, the other episodes are garbage. It's all hip hop and country. I don't care. That does not suit our purposes here on the Fortress of Rock. Now, finally, to wrap up news of the world, some album news. New releases, reissues, what have you. An old school band that keeps coming back. And I respect them. I will admit I don't listen to their music all that much. I don't even know if we'll review this album here on the Fortress of Rock, but I respect and admire this band. They have tried to keep their lineup intact as best they could. They have tried to put out music every couple years as best they could, going out on tour this year with Yes. Of course, we just mentioned Steve Howe of Yes in reference to Asia. But we also talked about here recently a double bill of Deep Purple and Yes out on tour. Deep Purple is putting out a brand new studio album called Equals One. It is out July the 19th. This will be the first album featuring recent new member Simon McBride on guitar, replacing the legendary Steve Morse, who had to amicably step away from the band for family matters. Steve Morse is all behind the replacement of him with Simon McBride. I love to see that in rock and roll. Hate to see the legendary players, the performers who've been with these bands for decades, have to step away. Family reasons, health reasons, but at least when it's amicable, it makes things a lot better for the fans, for the band, for everybody involved. So Equals One, the new Deep Purple album, out July the 19th. And for all of you Beatles fans, Paul McCartney fans, an album that has been bootlegged forever, culled from August 1974 sessions that were recorded for a potential documentary and a potential live record. Paul McCartney and Wings, One Hand Clapping, will be out on June the 14th. Now, I have not seen this hit Amazon yet, so I'm still a little sketchy on the format details. It will be out on CD, vinyl, and digital. Now, it looks to me, from the track listing, which is out, that at least it's a 3 CD set. I think we can lock that down. It is 3 CDs. Not sure how many LPs in the vinyl format. But Paul McCartney and Wings, One Hand Clapping, out June the 14th. And that's going to do it for news of the world. Of course, we are not even close to being done yet. Next up is Breakdown. We have got the brand new album from Pearl Jam, Dark Matter, along with 4 new songs. So you do not want to miss that. We're going to take our weekly trip in the Rock and Roll DeLorean in segment 3 and look to the future for what's coming up in new music in segment 4. One really cheesy, quick, short, generic music break, and I will be right back with Breakdown. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fortress of Rock here, episode 141 on April the 26th, 2024. It is a nasty, rainy night here outside the Fortress. Hopefully, summer will be coming soon, though. better weather coming for concerts, outdoor activities, all that good stuff, cranking up the stereo within reason in the car, even outside on the back patio, on the deck, wherever you like to lounge and recreate. Breakdown segment 2, of course, our tribute to the late great Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, where we talk about the new music. We got to have new music. We got to have something to look forward to push us forward. Rock and roll will never die. And we are here on the Fortress of Rock to make sure that does not happen. Even though sometimes some of our favorite artists try to make it seem like it is dying, for the most part, here today, pretty positive with a few exceptions. We'll start off with the much anticipated new album from Pearl Jam, Dark Matter. Been looking forward to this one for quite a while, kids. Need to take a few minutes to discuss this one, however. Let's look at a little bit of background here. Now, I am a big Pearl Jam fan. They are not one of my top 10 bands of all time, but they're in that top 25 to 30 range. I admire the fact that they are still around. They're still putting out new music, and they are trying their best to keep that connection with their fans and not just rest on their laurels. So that's a big thumbs up for Eddie Vedder and company. Now, on the downside, I get a little tired of everybody acting like they're still relevant and important. Kind of like what we see in a sports analogy in golf with Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods is no longer relevant. Now, Pearl Jam's not that bad. Okay. And Pearl Jam is not a self-destructive force like a Tiger Woods is. But leading into the release of this album, Dark Matter, all we heard from the band in interviews and the rock and roll press was this was a return to form for Pearl Jam. They were going back to the 90s, and they were going back to that triumvirate, that successful triumvirate, the first 3 albums, of course, 10, Versus, and Vitology. No, sorry kids, that's not the case with Dark Matter. You feel, listening to this album, you feel cheated in a certain respect. Because Pearl Jam has not put out a consistently good album in decades. I would go back to Yield as the last truly great Pearl Jam album. Now, the self-titled album, I tend to call it the Avocado album. My daughter and I, when it came out and she was younger, because of the cover, kind of like Metallica is known as the Black Album. But you have to go back that far to really find a consistently good beginning to end Pearl Jam album. And so that's why I'm a little bit upset with all this pre-release hype for Dark Matter based on what we get. Now, the 11 songs on Dark Matter, we of course will review and go through here on the Fortress of Rock, track by track. And like so many other albums that we have seen released over the last few years, starts off fantastic. And you would expect that. The leadoff song on Dark Matter is Scared of Fear. And you can hear a little clever, if you listen real hard, you can hear that little clever reference back to what I was just talking about, where they're trying to refer to their old glory days. You hear a whip at the beginning of Scared of Fear, which I think is directly correlated to the whips you hear at the beginning of the awesome track on Vitalogy, Satan's Bed. So if you're going to do that, if you're going to make these little sly Easter egg references to your great Hall of Fame level past, you better come through. Now, at least Scared of Fear does. Scared of Fear is a great song to lead off the album with. It's got a really catchy riff. Now, this is not a heavy rocker like you would expect from something off of 10. This is a little bit more mid-tempo, but it is extremely catchy. It has got a great riff. Then we get into track 2, React, Respond. And this is one of the songs on this album that I have trouble with. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying when I say I have trouble with it, my opinion of it seems to shift and change the more I listen to the album. And there's a couple other songs on Dark Matter that I have the same problem with. So it's going to be really hard when we get to the end here for me to give you a definitive review. But React Respond on the surface sounds like a typical quote-unquote angry Pearl Jam song. It's got a heavy bass line, which feeds into the guitar, and you get another decent little riff. But beyond that, there's no catch, hook, anything in there that really makes it rise above, again, a standard mediocre Pearl Jam song. But like I said, the more times I listen to it, I go back and forth. Is it mediocre? Is it a little bit better than mediocre? But then we get to the highlight of the album. Track 3 is Wreckage. And I truly believe that if Wreckage had been released back in the 90s, in the heyday of grunge, Wreckage would have been a monumental, massive hit. Of course, now we know rock and roll does not get played on the radio anymore. But Wreckage is Pearl Jam understanding they're getting older. They lied about Dark Matter being a return to rocking form. You're not getting Even Flow and Alive. Wreckage, this is a compliment. This is not denigrating Pearl Jam in the least. This is complimenting them for knowing where they are in their career right now. Wreckage sounds like Pearl Jam doing Hootie and the Blowfish. It is catchy. It is upbeat. Even though you've got a title called Wreckage, initially, if you told me I got Pearl Jam doing a song called Wreckage, I'm thinking, yeah, this could be the one song that's going to go back to the early, harder grunge stuff. No, Wreckage is actually radio-friendly pop, rock, but it is unbelievably catchy. It is an earworm. I give kudos, credit to Eddie Vedder, Stone Gossard, Jeff Ament, all the guys in Pearl Jam for realizing that if they're going to go down this road, go down it all the way and make a truly great pop rock song. Now, again, this is not a return to form, as the pre-release stuff has said. It's a different Pearl Jam. Scared of Fear and Wreckage, both, track 1, track 3, give you a little bit of a different side of Pearl Jam that I was really encouraged to hear. So if we're not going to hear the nasty, angry young man that we heard in the 90s, at least we've got men that have matured and understand how to form great songs that people want to listen to over and over again. And there's nothing wrong with that. And then, of course, track 4, the title track, Dark Matter, the first release from this album, that's the one where we thought maybe they are going back old school. And we've heard bands in the past, Metallica, U2 have pulled this before, where they've strayed off the path and then come back with a certain level of success to their roots. And Dark Matter sounds like that for Pearl Jam. And it's got one of the greatest lines in the chorus, to me, in terms of lyrics, you'll ever hear, especially given this day and age. Everybody else pays for someone else's mistake. Love, love, love that line. Can't get enough of it. I can't get enough of Pearl Jam's Dark Matter, the title track. So we're 4 songs in right now, and I am really liking Dark Matter a lot. Maybe React Respond is a little weak, but then for the most part, the rest of the album falls apart, and we don't get anything that really rocks throughout the rest of the songs. Track 5 is Won't Tell, whereas React Respond, I said, was a typical angry Pearl Jam song. Won't Tell is a typical mid-tempo Pearl Jam song, and I don't mean that in a good way. Whereas Scared of Fear and Wreckage might apply as great mid-tempo Pearl Jam songs, Won't Tell is the standard boring Pearl Jam mid-tempo song that we have gotten way too often over the last 15 years. And in track 6, same thing with Upper Hand. This is where you get disheartened and discouraged by Pearl Jam. They let you down. And this seems to happen. Doesn't matter if we're talking about Gigaton. Doesn't matter if we're talking about Backspacer. Go back the last 3, 4, 5 albums. This is the typical Pearl Jam that unfortunately I have come to know and not hate, but be disappointed in. Luckily, track 7 fits in very well with Scared of Fear and Wreckage. Track 7 is Waiting for Stevie. Another great, catchy, mid-tempo song. And at this point, 7 songs in, I'm thinking, if everything else, I knew Running was coming, a song we've reviewed in the past. I knew Running was coming later. So I've got Waiting for Stevie now at track 7, which is very good. Very, very good. Just like Wreckage. Probably would have been a big radio hit back in the 90s when you could have gotten a song like this on the radio. So now I'm thinking, okay, we can salvage Dark Matter. Got Running, we got a couple other songs. If those songs are really good, Dark Matter becomes a very, very good Pearl Jam album. So Running is next. Again, we've reviewed it in the past. It's a short song trying to reclaim the punk grunge credentials of the past. You got a heavy bass intro. You've got guitars towards the end that sound like sirens. It's fine for what it is. As long as it's not expected to be one of the best songs on the album, it's fine for what it is. But then we get track 9, Something Special, the worst song on the album, folksy, poppy garbage. Could be one of the worst Pearl Jam songs I have ever heard. And then we go back to where I was talking about being torn and having issues. I mentioned with React Respond. The last 2 songs, Got to Give and Setting Sun. I go back and forth on. The more I listen to this album, I can't figure out if I really not love them. Definitely don't love them. But if I like them or I don't like them. Got to Give is track 10 and Setting Sun is track 11. And I've listened to this album 7 or 8 times. So by now you would have thought I would have had a firm opinion on these songs. And that's the frustrating thing about Dark Matter, is that it just doesn't come out of the gates and blow you away like classic early Pearl Jam would. That being said, I've had a really hard time. I'm right on the fence. I mean, right on the fence to whether I should recommend this or whether I should not. I'm going to say no. I am not recommending Dark Matter. If you're not a Pearl Jam fan by now, this album is not going to win you over. If you are a Pearl Jam fan, there's definitely some good stuff on here, but it's a matter of false advertising. This is not old school Pearl Jam. It's just not. And I will go back again to Yield and say, to me, definitively Yield, the last great Pearl Jam album. And they just can't seem to consistently recapture the magic from that album or their first 3 albums in the 90s. So very, very close, but I just can't recommend Dark Matter. All right, we got 4 songs here in Breakdown to review. Let's start off with David Lee Roth. Yeah, it seems like he puts out a new song every other week now. How about we get a new album, Diamond Dave? Let's put all these songs together, sequence it, maybe tweak them, clean them up a little bit, remaster a few, and give us a full album instead of this YouTube garbage. Because last time I checked, Scotch and Sofa is not available on streaming. You have to watch the video on YouTube. Now, Scotch and Sofa is cheesy David Lee Roth, the just a gigolo, I ain't got no buddy side of David Lee Roth's personality. With the horns, a little bit of the lounge lizard feel to it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. And all these new songs that David Lee Roth has been putting out over the last couple of years have been very hit and miss. Some have been borderline brilliant, and some have been absolutely abysmal. And Scotch and Sofa falls in the middle. Scotch and Sofa, again, it's nice to hear the old cheesy David Lee Roth, the showman, the carnival barker, that side of his personality emerge again. But in the end, you can also say it's stale. It's nothing really new. Have to give Dave credit, though. He's active. He is still putting out content. He is still trying to draw attention to himself. He is a showman. So it's just like Pearl Jam's Dark Matter to me. If you like David Lee Roth, you'll like Scotch and Sofa. But I'm right on the fence again with this one, just like Pearl Jam. This is not going to win David Lee Roth any new fans. He's done better and he's done worse. That's the best I can give you. Judge for yourselves, kids. Get on YouTube and listen to Scotch and Sofa. Let's move on to Slash, second release from his upcoming blues covers album, Orgy of the Damned. This one features Chris Stapleton, current hot commodity in country music, remaking Oh Well. Now, I believe originally this was a Fleetwood Mac song. We all know the song. If you hear it, the minute you starting on the lyrics with Chris Stapleton singing, you'll know the song. But boy, Chris Stapleton does his best to sleepwalk through this. This song, as opposed to the first single, you'll remember we reviewed this a few weeks ago, Killing Floor, featured Brian Johnson of AC/DC on vocals and Steven Tyler on harmonica. In that song, I told you kids, Brian Johnson changing up his vocal style was phenomenal. A welcome surprise, and the energy Steven Tyler brought with his harmonica was great. Slash seemed to be the one sleepwalking through this song. So now for this, we flip it. Chris Stapleton seems like he came in to collect a paycheck. If he got paid, I don't know. But now, Oh Well is not the type of song that you're going to showcase vocals on. I get that. But you want to talk about bare bottom, minimal effort? That's what you get from Chris Stapleton. Now, halfway through the song, Slash takes over and says, now I will start to show the people how it's done. And we get some phenomenal guitar work from Slash in the second half of the song that saves Oh Well from being complete and total garbage. And again, hate to say it, on the fence again with this one. I promise the last two songs I will not do this to you. But listen to Oh Well. I will say listen to Oh Well for Slash's guitar work. I will recommend it because of Slash's guitar work. But Chris Stapleton, honestly pathetic. Honestly pathetic. Put in a little bit of effort. Okay? This is not my realm. Country music is not my realm or my forte. But this is a pathetic effort from Chris Stapleton. But Slash, killer guitar. All right, last two songs. Definitely not on the fence. I was on the fence with Pearl Jam. I was on the fence with David Lee Roth and Slash and Chris Stapleton. Not so with these last two songs. Two enthusiastic recommendations. First up, the third single from the upcoming album from Kings of Leon is Nothing to Do. And I cannot wait for this album from Kings of Leon. I just cannot wait. We've already had Mustang. We have had Split Screen. And now we get Nothing to Do. Of course, the new album is Can We Please Have Fun, out May the 10th. So we're just a few weeks away from reviewing the full album. But Nothing to Do is a dead solid rocker. Whereas Mustang was a little bit bizarre. And you could almost say the Mustang, along with Split Screen, harken back to more of an early 80s alternative sound. Now, one was a little bit more quirky and weird in Mustang, where Split Screen reminds you of a mid-tempo Police or Cars song. Nothing to Do is straight on newer hard rock in a good way. This is just the band balls to the wall. We're not talking AC/DC or Metallica, but for what they do, Kings of Leon, this is balls to the wall rock and roll. One of the harder songs I have ever heard from them. I personally have loved Kings of Leon almost from the beginning. Cannot recommend Nothing to Do More. And once again, cannot wait for the album coming out May the 10th. And then we have the third single finally to wrap up Breakdown from the mighty Sebastian Bach. Yes, former lead singer of Skid Row. The title and the beginning of this song had me worried. I will admit it. The third single from the upcoming album, Child Within the Man, also coming out like Kings of Leon on May the 10th. Third single is Hold On to the Dream. Now, you kids tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking power ballad. Got to be a power ballad. Kind of like my preconceived notions going back to my Pearl Jam review of the song Wreckage, where I thought this is going to be a hard grunge rocker. And it turns out to be more of a Hootie and the Blowfish, mid-tempo, catchy, radio-friendly song. We'll hold on to the dream for about 30-45 seconds. Yeah, it sounds like it's probably going to be a sappy, cheesy ballad. And then it kicks in, and it is a rocker. It is catchy. It is well written. Just like Kings of Leon, Sebastian Bach is 3-4-3. I have loved all three releases so far, from Child Within the Man, Hold On to the Dream, Makes You Pine. Again, we've talked about this in the past. Some of these breakups make no sense. And there are talks and things going back and forth with bands like Bon Jovi. And we'll talk a little bit more about Richie Sambora later on in the show. But Sebastian Bach broaching the subject here recently in interviews, promoting his new album about getting back together with Skid Row. And it would be unbelievable to reignite that magic, that fire that was Skid Row for only 3 albums, but 3 phenomenal albums. And Sebastian Bach, 3 songs in on the new album, Child Within the Man, seems like he is trying to pull things back a little bit, back to that old school pop rock mix, hard pop rock mix, not forgetting how to write a catchy song like he seems to have done on some of his solo albums. Hold On to the Dream, again, confirming that I cannot wait to listen to Child Within the Man out on May the 10th. All right, so it is time to get Doc Brown, wake him up from his nappy nap, get him to fire up the rock and roll DeLorean, get it going to 1.21 gigawatts and get us into the rock and roll time stream. Up next, after a quick, brief, cheesy music break, it is I Want to Go Back here on the Fortress of Rock. All right, segment 3 here, episode 141 of the Fortress of Rock, April the 26th, 2024, and you know what this means. This means that I have got Doc Brown sitting to my left in the rock and roll DeLorean. We are heading back into the rock and roll time stream for I Want to Go Back, our tribute to the late, great Eddie Money, where we look back at anniversaries of classic album releases, birthdays, and moments in rock and roll history. Significant, important moments in rock history. Before we get up to 1.21 gigawatts and get this show on the road, I've got to take care of business. And that business includes, first and foremost, where you can find the Fortress of Rock. You're obviously listening somewhere, but you have options and choices. Options and choices are always good. Currently, we've had a couple platforms drop off in the last few months. So right now, as of April the 26th, you can find the Fortress of Rock on Spotify, Pocket Casts, Apple, iHeartRadio, Overcast, Amazon Music, Castbox, and Audible. You can also check out our Facebook page. Fun stuff every weekend on the Facebook page for the Fortress of Rock. This weekend, we start off with your Weekend Rock Project every Friday night, right around the time we drop a new episode of the Fortress of Rock. We also post your Weekend Rock Project. We give you a theme, some sort of parameter. You have to find us a song, an album, an artist that fits that parameter. This weekend, easy peasy lemon squeezy this weekend. Just don't go overboard, kids. I want the best of the best, your personal favorites here. Because otherwise, you can just throw out thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of songs. I want your best. The best rock songs featuring a female vocalist of all time. I start the proceedings off with Barracuda by Heart. See how I did that? I picked one song. I might throw 3 or 4 more out there, give you my top 5, but that's it. Don't go crazy and just throw songs out there just because a woman is singing them. That's not the point of this particular weekend's exercise. So the Weekend Rock Project is out there, and of course, Sunday, every Sunday afternoon, is New Music Sunday, where we post a link to a YouTube video, whether it's a fully produced video, a lyric video, a visualizer video, whatever it might be, just to get you to listen to a new song. Not sure yet what this Sunday's song is going to be. Still got a couple days to work through that. I have some ideas. I will say that probably it's going to be one of the songs that I will talk about in the next segment in Wrap It Up. Now, beyond that, I do the best I can with my ridiculously agile rock and roll brain to come up with ideas for stories, trivia tidbits, but you need help. There's just too much going on. Got to have some help. So my 3 main sources for a lot of the stories that you hear me discuss in segment 1, News of the World, as well as here in segment 3, ultimateclassicrock.com, thisdayinmusic.com, and the mighty Van Halen newsdesk.com. Take the mighty out. It's not in there. It's not in the URL. All right. Don't have a lot here. And I want to go back this week for April the 26th. So this will probably be a fairly quick segment. We'll start off with anniversaries. April the 26th, 2019. Phil McCormick, one of the singers for Molly Hatchet, passed away. He was a lead singer for Molly Hatchet from 1995 through 2019. So he had a pretty good run there with Molly Hatchet. Of course, not a lead singer that we would know from the classic era. There were two other guys that really sang most of the songs that we knew from the late 70s through the 80s. And by all accounts, I know somebody who went to see Molly Hatchet last year in 2023 in concert. And the new guy, I'm sorry, but the new guy they've got, I've heard, is awful. Does not fit the mold at all. Completely off base from the Southern rock, the classic Southern rock vibe that we know and love with Molly Hatchet. So, by all accounts, sounds like Phil McCormack might have been the last great singer for Molly Hatchet. On this day, April the 26th, 2013, and we always dabble a little bit here and there in other genres. If the anniversary is significant enough. On this day in 2013, country music legend George Jones passed away. Now, in the first segment this week, we talked about Wings. We talked about this one hand clapping album from originally culled from August 1974 sessions. But on this day, April the 26th in 1976, arguably the greatest album from Paul McCartney and Wings, was the number one album in the U.S. on this day. Wings at the Speed of Sound. Again, number one album in the U.S. on this day in 1976. And then finally, again, kind of a brief anniversary segment here. April the 26th, 1969. Led Zeppelin played Whole Lotta Love live for the very first time in San Francisco on this day, again in 1969. So we move on to birthdays. And I'll tell you what, the drummers are stepping up here. You'll note a trend, especially through our first four birthdays here. April the 26th, 1976. Relatively young pup compared to me and probably a lot of you out there. Jose Pasillas, drummer for one of my favorite, what would I call it, a latter-day band, a band that's really been popular over the last 2 decades. And there are very few of them out there that I like. You know that. Jose Pasillas, drummer for Incubus, born on this day in 1976. Step back 1 year to April the 26th, 1975. Joey Jordison was the drummer for Slipknot. Unfortunately, passed away in 2021. Born on April the 26th, 1961. Chris Mars, drummer for The Replacements. The Replacements, very influential band, but very underrated band in terms of their popularity, sales. Really only had one charting hit in I'll Be You. But those of you who know rock and roll, and I know there's a ton of you out there, you wouldn't be listening to this podcast otherwise, know the impact and the influence of The Replacements. One of those great bands that helped boost alternative rock throughout the 80s. Paul Westerberg, the lead singer, went on to a little bit of success as a solo artist. You might know a couple of his songs from the phenomenal soundtrack to the movie Singles. But the drummer for the Replacements, Chris Mars, born on this day in 1961. Yes, another drummer, 4 in a row. As I mentioned, this was coming. Now we're getting into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame territory. April the 26th, 1960. And we'll talk more about this band in Wrap It Up. Drummer for Duran Duran, Roger Taylor, born on this day in 1960. And I've already told you kids the stories about when I was growing up, how I loved Duran Duran, but you weren't allowed to tell anybody if you were a guy that you liked Duran Duran. It wasn't cool. Now, thumbs up, definitely cool to like Duran Duran. Born on this day, April the 26th, 1943, Gary Wright was in the band Spooky Tooth, but probably most well known for a couple big hit songs as a solo artist. Love is Alive, and of course, still considered to this day one of the all-time classic songs from the 70s, Dreamweaver. Born on this day, April the 26th, 1942, Bobby Rydell, who sang many hit songs back in the day, but the ones you would probably most know, Wild One and Volare, oh, covered by many people, Volare. And then finally, April the 26th, 1938, guitar legend Duane Eddy was born. So there you go, kids. That is it for I Want to Go Back. Told you it was going to be a little bit of a light week. Some days, you know how it is. Some days you look back in history and so many different things went on and amazing monumental events occurred. And there are some days where it was, there were a few cool things. And April the 26th just happens to be one of those days in rock and roll. But that's fine. I'm sure we'll have a bounce back day here in the next week or two. But, of course, we are not done yet. One final segment left here on the Fortress of Rock. We've talked about the present. We've talked about the past. Now it's time to talk about the future. Plus, we got to give you our number one album and our number one songs of the week, our top songs of the week. Another cheesy, quick 5 to 10 second generic music break, and Wrap It Up is on the other side. All right, everybody, fourth and final segment here Friday night, April the 26th, 2024, The Fortress of Rock, episode 141, getting ready to wrap it up. Our tribute to the fabulous Thunderbirds. This is where we look to the future. Again, we've looked to the past, talked about the present. Now we look to the future, which in many ways, the most fun part of this entire podcast. Because the past, you can't change. The present will be gone in the blink of an eye, but the future, we can always alter it and make it better. There's always the promise of greatness in the future. So first thing we do, as always here in Wrap It Up, is we look about 4 or 5 weeks into the future here on the Fortress to let you know what we're going to be reviewing. Next week is a very odd week. Next week is going to be a very tricky week for me in many respects. So we don't have an album or we don't have a concert yet. We'll have some songs. We'll talk about songs in a few minutes. So we're going to other media. Next week, we will have a movie review for you. We will review Bob Marley, One Love, currently streaming on Paramount Plus. And we will also dive into new documentaries involving classic Hall of Fame bands from the 80s. There's a Duran Duran documentary that just dropped recently on Netflix. And, of course, the brand new Bon Jovi Hulu documentary, Richie Sambora. Not very happy about it. We'll talk more about Richie here in a couple minutes, but all of that stuff, TV and streaming, will take up breakdown in episode 142 on May the 3rd. Then the concert season begins. Part of the reason why the taping schedule for next week is going to be kind of messy is because concerts come into play. And the review of those concerts will come in 2 weeks. A double shot. Locally here known as the Big Growl. Hard rock and roll. Featuring Fuel, Saliva, and Seether. We'll have our review of the Big Growl in South Bend, Indiana. And we will also review the mighty Judas Priest with Sabaton in Kalamazoo, Michigan. So again, double concert review for you. Episode 143 on May the 10th. Then we get back into the regular flow for a little while. In 3 weeks, we will have Sebastian Bach, his brand new album, Child Within the Man. Of course, we just reviewed Hold On to the Dream. Our review of the full album, and so far, very, very impressed with the first 3 songs. Child Within the Man, Sebastian Bach, episode 144 on May the 17th. And then in 4 weeks, the new Kings of Leon album, another song we reviewed here today in this episode, April the 26th on the Fortress of Rock. The full album, Can We Please Have Fun? And just like with Sebastian Bach, the first 3 singles from Can We Please Have Fun have been outstanding. So hopefully they will not let us down, Sebastian Bach or Kings of Leon. Can We Please Have Fun? The full album review will hit episode 145, May the 24th. And then going 5 weeks out, the last day of May, May the 31st, will be the double album from Collective Soul. Here to Eternity. We'll have that for you at the end of May. Again, episode 146 of the Fortress of Rock on May the 31st. Now, our number 1 album this week, even though I was not overly enthusiastic about it, it was the album I listened to most this past week. So the Fortress of Rock number 1 album this week is, of course, Dark Matter from Pearl Jam. So now for the next couple weeks it'll get interesting because until Sebastian Bach and Kings of Leon come out, the next couple weeks are wide open. So I imagine as I prepare for the Judas Priest concert, we might see a reemergence of Judas Priest's new album, Invincible Shield, at the top of the charts for a week, if not 2 weeks. But who knows? Depends on what kind of mood I'm in, what the Fortress of Rock dictates. Now, the top songs will always shift and change. And since we've got a lot of great new songs that just came out, we'll talk about those here in the next minute. right now, based on this past week, I have praised this song over the last few weeks, even though, again, Dark Matter, the album, mediocre at best. Wreckage is just a brilliant, brilliant song. So, Wreckage by Pearl Jam will share the top honors this week for songs on the Fortress of Rock with the phenomenal Rockin' third single from Kings of Leon and the upcoming album, Can We Please Have Fun? Nothing to Do. Nothing to Do and Wreckage, your top songs of the week. Now, I've alluded to the fact there are some new songs that have just hit here within the last few days to add to our slate, our list of what we want to discuss, review, and talk about over the next few weeks in our breakdown segment. If you don't live under a rock, no pun intended, you have got to know that the long-awaited new song with Motley Crue featuring John 5 on guitar, Dogs of War, is out. So we will definitely be reviewing Dogs of War, I would imagine, next week here on the Fortress of Rock. Now, we've been talking a lot about Bon Jovi lately and the trials and tribulations. Still really upset with John Bon Jovi, even wanting to take people's money on that last tour when he knew his voice was shot. So I don't have a lot of sympathy for him right now. I tend to side with Richie Sambora, for better or for worse, for right or wrong. Now, Richie Sambora has had some really, really good solo stuff. Now, we're going back quite a few years, probably 2 decades at least. So I tend to get a little bit intrigued when I hear Richie Sambora has got some solo material coming out. The Bon Jovi documentary, out now. He's not happy about how he's portrayed, but a very cunning, very sly marketing move on his part. Why not, since you're going to be back in the spotlight here, release new music? So we have a new song from Richie Sambora called I Pray. And this will be the first, from what I have read, the first of 4 new songs released weekly here up until we get to mid-May. So we're going to have a decent amount of new Richie Sambora music to talk about in the coming weeks here on the Fortress of Rock, starting with I Pray. Still looking to review this double-sided one-off release, I guess. I don't think we're getting a new album. It doesn't seem like right away from the Hold Steady. But they have put out this double-sided release of The Death of the Punchline and Radar and Lita. So we will review that for you here as soon as possible on the Fortress of Rock. Under the Radar band that we have discussed over the past year or so, the Cold Stairs, they've got a new song, Horse to Water. We're going to be reviewing The Hives, one of my favorite bands, deluxe edition out now of Lex Hives, with 2 unreleased tracks that we want to dive into, High School Shuffle and Insane. And then finally, anniversary edition of Rebel Yell is out from Billy Idol. By all accounts, this unreleased track is very, very interesting. Not saying it's great, I'm just saying it's interesting. But this is kind of the song we were waiting to hear from this anniversary release of Rebel Yell. Of course, we recently reviewed Billy Idol's cover of Love Don't Live Here Anymore, a classic Rolls Royce song. But now we get Billy Idol's Best Way Out of Here. So we'll have that for you here on the Fortress of Rock very, very soon as well. So now you know everything, past, present, future, when it comes to rock and roll. And I hope you enjoyed it. I always do. Always enjoy spending an hour and a half or so, plus or minus, give and take, with you kids out there. As I mentioned, next week's episode might be a little funky because of a very hectic, crazy week. Might have to record a lot of the segments earlier than I would normally. But that does not mean you're not getting a full-fledged 4-segment edition of the Fortress of Rock, episode 142, dropping on May the 3rd. But until then, hope you enjoy your weekend. Weather getting much, much better finally. Love the one you're with. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane. You are who you are. Until next Friday night, take care of the ones you love, and peace out.